Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal production channel here at YouTube. Welcome to another album review, and today's review is right now in the third installment of one of these Doomsday Today Records releases and reviews and so on, and all because of me receiving that big promo package that I received from Paul of Doomsday's Today Records several weeks ago, or a couple of weeks ago, whatever. So again, this is the next one up here, third one here. Well, before I really get into showing the album, this is not something that I normally tend to showcase on the channel. Usually when I review stuff, it's usually within the realms of hard rock and heavy metal or traditional metal, thrash, speed metal, you know, the more traditional styles of metal. The only times I'll branch out to extreme stuff is basically with, it would say, sometimes maybe death metal, or at times some of the more earlier black metal stuff. This one almost falls in that line, but this one is a little more experimental. This one is, God, what's the best one I'm going to pronounce if I really fuck up? It's Zogthorgven. I think that's the way to pronounce the name there. There it is, which of course is what was formed by Kelly Bogues. I think as his name, Kelly Bogues, last name, who knows? I probably might have butchered that. Bogues, whatever. So we're off to a great start. Anyways, this is the debut album from here, and of course, not the first of his project. There seems to be a lot more project that he put together, and since most of his project was also released through Doomsday's Today Records, there's going to be a bit more to come to here. At least there's a lot more there. So do not expect this to be the last one to review of his stuff. Again, there's probably going to be more to come. That's probably what I was about to say. Alright, so this is the right now the only album they released under this project. This album is self-titled. This was released back in November 5th of 2019. So this is still relatively new in some aspect. This is like, several months ago, basically, so it's not that old. And so that the difference with this one is that this one tends to be more on the experimental side. So I guess I should definitely start going in to the album here. So let's definitely go this again. Let's just zoom right on into the review. So this is, again, a self-titled album. Again, this is very experimental. Also, I'm also starting to leave out the fact that this album clocks into 58 minutes and 3 seconds. Which, of course, probably due to that is due to there is a bonus track on here, which I'll get to when I get to the track. I'll let you know what is the bonus track on why this has probably been lengthened to at least 58 minutes. Anyways, again, to briefly go, just to move a little backward back to, this is basically very experimental, according to the Bandcamp page here, which I will link to you in the description box here if you're at the end of this review. If you're interested on checking this album out, definitely you know where to find the Bandcamp link. So again, since I'm stalling everything, this album, at least according to on the Bandcamp page, this apparently, to sum up the music, apparently according here, it's experimental electronics inspired by a black metal soul. So some of this stuff does have that black metal influence, but it tends to be more, has more of a experimental more electronic, and at times very dark ambience, even at times even flirting a little bit of industrial, and at times maybe a bit speedcore in some ways, which I'll get to some of those tracks for sure. So it tends to really mix a lot of that, but it definitely has that for sure. It's got that black metal drive in a way, but instead the engine itself is probably, or the either the black metal is the engine, or it's the real experimental stuff that is the drivers. So that's probably the best one I can sum it up most of this album. But since I have to always do since I have to definitely go into more in-depth looks into this album, I have coming up with quite a bit of words for some of these songs. So here we go. All right. So the album opens up with the song called Black Blizzard Blues, which begins with like a sound clip of something before going into, which is this is probably the most straightforward song on the album in terms of just straight up guitar driven. It's a very slow, sludgy, heavy track, and basically in itself is probably a little over 7 minutes in its own right. I mean, the song is like 8 minutes and 35 seconds, but the song, and that's also due to, of course, the intro, which definitely kind of for sure lengthens the track up a bit. But I think in itself, by itself, it's definitely around 7 minutes long. It's definitely a long track. It does here and there throw a little bit of industrial peppers here and there. It's peppered a little bit around the track, but overall, it's definitely the most straightforward. I mean, the vocals itself is definitely very distorted, very typical black metal vocals, but it's surrounded by a very heavy, slow, sludgy riff. Very interesting. Very not a bad way to open up the album. But from there, this is where things definitely start. You really hear that experimental stuff that at least Kelly Bogues was for sure was summoning up for this album in terms of like experimental electronics, which again, so Witch Hermit follows the track, and this one definitely it mixes black metal with electronic beats and stuff. It definitely has that feel. You definitely really got to really get the whole idea of what Kelly Bogues was for sure was summoning for this album. Then of course coming up after that is Cassette Cult, which is total speedcore, but with that black metal philosophy. Definitely interesting in its own right. The next track after that is, of course, Buy More Ammo. Now, this track is apparently is the bonus track. There's at least 2 versions of this. There's the regular album version, and then, of course, there's the Fuck More Off remix. So that is your bonus track, and that is extends the length to about 7 minutes and 18 seconds. Again, this one is more industrial, like electronic, mixed with black metal that is a little, over 7 minutes. Definitely a very, another really interesting track in its own right. Iron Mountains, more of the same experimental, electronic-inspired black metal, but with a somewhat slower pace. Slave Nation, for a little over a minute, begins with digital ambient sounds before turning into another speedcore Latin black metal track. Then, of course, Indigenous, which is a more moodier track, combines most of the elements of the previous tracks, but has a bit some twists and turns within the song. So the very at least of the original material, this is the last one. It's titled Dreamland. Is basically a love letter to Art Bell. If you're not familiar with Art Bell, he was, of course, was the late creator and host for, of course, Coast to Coast AM, which, of course, began, I think, sometime in the late 70s, 1978 to be exact, which again was a AM radio program that definitely, for sure, focused on a lot of paranormal and at times maybe conspiracy type subjects and so on, especially aliens, for example. Which probably also been just one of the influence for me. TV shows like The X-Files, for example. But Dreamland, on the other hand, was one of his other radio shows, but it was more so geared towards the internet. During the time when the internet was beginning, I believe, is when Art Bell decided to start up Dreamland. So that, of course, again, same philosophy of various conspiracy and stuff. And this track definitely infuses a lot of those clips. I think that was taken from, of course, the old Dreamland broadcasts that were broadcasted on the internet. But again, is a love letter to Art Bell, and I feel captures the essence and spirit of the late radio host. It's definitely a fine track. If I have to really pick an absolute favorite from this album, it'd be Dreamland. And of course, given the fact that my parents definitely still listen to Coast to Coast, which these days is now being hosted by George Norrie. So it definitely has a little bit of sentimental stuff to me. So it's definitely a great fucking track off this album, and definitely is probably, again, it's probably the runner-up for my favorite track off this album. The very last of at least of the other stuff here is a cover of The Cure's Cold. Which is a very interesting cover in its own right. He definitely adds his own twists to it. He adds his own feel and everything to the song, and definitely makes it his own. That's definitely something you definitely don't always see with a lot of bands when they do cover tracks. But he definitely, since this is all experimental based music, he definitely adds a lot of that to this song. So definitely interesting, and of course the bonus track being, again, a remix of the hashtag Buy More Ammo. Alright, so that definitely summons up the whole entire album. This is definitely not something I always tend to really showcase on this channel, because it's the music and everything is definitely out of my wheelhouse. And of course right here, everyone will also expect me to do to at least to add my my score, the talk about my score, whatever. I don't have a score for this, and the reason is I don't want to come off as biased whenever I for at least the score. I don't want to come off completely biased, because again, I am not completely familiar with a lot of this stuff. I mean, I do know if I have listened to at least a few industrial bands. I think one of the few really industrial metal bands I probably have ever listened to was actually Skin Chamber, but that's about it. It's definitely not something I always listen to a lot, and because since I'm not familiar with the genre itself, I feel like it'd be wrong for me to actually give out a score, because of since I feel like I am definitely an expert in terms of at least maybe the hard rock and metal genre and just those. I think it's more easier for me to give out scores within those albums, but because of this is something that's a little more different, I feel like giving a score would, in a way, probably would rob a little bit of this. Instead, I feel if you really want to be interested in checking this one out, you probably just want to at least go by what I say, or just check the Bandcamp link that I posted in the description box, and definitely give it out. If you're definitely one of those that definitely has a open mind and definitely want to check out something that's a lot more different and try and test out if you've got a bit of a palette for stuff, for at least for different music and all of that, definitely give it a shot. But if you're not into this kind of stuff, I do not recommend at all. If you're not into this, I do not recommend that. However, if you're into at least stuff of this kind of caliber, I definitely recommend you probably give this at least a shot. So there, and if you do like what you hear, definitely go on and support. So with that, I hope y'all enjoyed. I probably, who knows, I might have made a lot more fuck-ups within this video, because again, it's not something I am very easy talking about all the time, because of it's not something I am very familiar with. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. Definitely, thank you for sending some of this stuff towards me. It's definitely been interesting. It's really been challenging me. That's definitely for sure. It's definitely a challenge. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. It's every Thrash Sam out. And I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.